There's a strange kind of silence in the Black Sea lately. Not the peacetime kind, more like the quiet after a predator learns new hunting grounds. Ukraine's navy is practically gone, yet somehow, Russian warships keep exploding, burning, or vanishing beneath the surface. It's not luck. It's a revolution in how a small country fights a fleet 10 times larger, using drones, deception, and pure nerve. This is how Ukraine's invisible fleet turned the Black Sea into the most dangerous body of water for the Russian Navy since World War II. When Russia invaded in 2022, it controlled the water. The Black Sea Fleet, headquartered in Sevastopol, had more than 40 combat vessels, cruisers, frigates, submarines, and landing ships. Ukraine had almost nothing that floated. Its flagship Hetman Sahedakny was scuttled in its own port to avoid capture. Russia declared dominance and began launching Caliber missiles at Ukrainian cities from hundreds of miles away. On paper, the story should have ended there. But in war, paper ships burn fast. Ukraine's survival instinct didn't end at the shoreline. It simply adapted. Behind the front lines, a small group of naval officers refused to accept defeat. They couldn't outgun the Russians, so they decided to outthink them. In late 2023, a handful of engineers in Odessa and Mykolaiv began tinkering with what looked like oversized surfboards packed with explosives. They called them unmanned surface vessels, or USVs, essentially sea drones. At first, Western observers dismissed them as desperation weapons. They had no armor, no guidance fins, and no operator protection. But they did have something Russia lacked: innovation under fire. By mid-2024, Ukraine was building them in underground workshops and abandoned shipyards. Each cost less than $300,000, cheap enough to lose dozens and still be worth it. They were guided by Starlink and packed with 200 kilograms of explosives. Silent, low, and fast, they slipped through radar shadows along the coast. The Ukrainian Ministry of Digital Transformation even bragged that each one could change history for the price of a truck. The Navy called them Magura V5S, a name that quickly became legend. They moved like sea ghosts, visible on radar for seconds before disappearing under jamming noise. When Russia began to notice them, it was already too late. In September 2023, those boards hit the jackpot. A swarm of USVs and aerial drones penetrated Sevastopol harbor and struck Russia's Minsk landing ship and Rostov-on-Don submarine. Two symbols of Russian naval power were crippled in one night. Satellite images the next morning showed blackened docks, sunken hulls, and emergency cranes hauling debris from the water. Western analysts were stunned. A fleet that had survived the Cold War and decades of NATO deterrence was now hiding from plywood and batteries. From that moment, the Black Sea ceased to be Russia's lake. Moscow tried everything. They extended harbor nets, deployed anti-drone patrols, and even built mock decoy ships. They jammed GPS, dropped depth charges at night, and flooded the airwaves with disinformation claiming all drones were destroyed. Yet the explosions kept coming. By early 2025, at least 20 Russian vessels, about one-third of its deployable surface fleet, had been damaged or destroyed according to multiple Western defense assessments. Reality check: Russia's Black Sea Fleet is retreating to Novorossiysk, nearly 250 miles east of Crimea. That's like moving your navy from New York to Boston just to avoid jet ski bombers. Even the Kremlin's own state TV quietly stopped airing footage of its ships leaving port. For Russia, losing ships isn't just tactical, it's psychological warfare in reverse. Naval heritage runs deep in Russian pride. Every destroyed vessel chips away at Putin's aura of control. That's why the Kremlin rarely admits these losses, calling them fire incidents or maintenance explosions. But every Ukrainian strike tells the truth through silence. Fewer missile launches, fewer patrols, fewer threats near Odessa. Ukraine's economy is breathing again because the sea lanes reopened for grain exports under NATO's protective umbrella. A country with no navy rebuilt its maritime access through persistence and digital warfare. The success of the invisible fleet didn't come from luck. It came from an invisible network. Ukraine's intelligence community fused satellite imagery, commercial mapping tools, and NATO-provided data feeds. Every sea drone strike started with hours of real-time reconnaissance, often from civilian ships or volunteer OSINT trackers. They mapped radar coverage, wave height, and even thermal signatures from Russian exhaust funnels. Then came the software. Each USV could act semi-autonomously if jammed, following a preloaded route based on terrain contours of the seafloor. Ukraine had effectively created a distributed swarm brain, using low-cost components to mimic military-grade autonomy. What began on the water didn't stay there. Ukraine's success with USVs inspired a new wave of integration between sea, air, and electronic warfare. Now, joint drone operations can blind radar, jam communications, and hit ships simultaneously from multiple vectors. Analysts call it networked attrition, every cheap drone feeding data into an AI-guided kill web. According to Ukraine's digital ministry, the country is now manufacturing more than 200,000 FPV drones per month, with naval variants being tested for autonomous targeting. Compare that to early 2024, when monthly production barely reached 20,000. That tenfold increase means the invisible fleet isn't just a one-off, it's a doctrine. Each factory that once made civilian electronics now produces control chips and carbon fiber hulls. Even 3D printers in universities contribute parts to the fleet. Ukraine's war economy has become digital, decentralized, and nearly impossible to bomb out of existence. Control of the Black Sea is about more than pride or propaganda. It's the artery through which energy, grain, and global perception flow. Each Russian ship sunk is one less launcher threatening southern Ukraine. Each Ukrainian success gives Western allies more confidence to invest in long-range deterrence. For NATO, the lessons are massive. A small nation under siege used consumer tech, AI, and asymmetric tactics to dismantle a superpower's fleet without a single traditional warship. That rewrites naval theory. And it's not just military. The Black Sea connects Europe's food security, Middle Eastern trade, and global grain prices. Each time Ukraine reopens that corridor, global inflation ticks down a notch. Every successful drone strike sends a ripple through world markets, reminding investors and governments alike that freedom of navigation still matters. There's another dimension, the Montreux Convention. Signed in 1936, it limits how many foreign warships can enter the Black Sea through Turkey's Bosporus Strait. It was meant to keep peace, but today, it locks NATO out of direct presence. That's why Ukraine's sea drones became the alliance's eyes and hands inside the zone. While U.S. satellites watch from orbit, Ukraine acts as the scalpel, cutting through Russia's logistics chain where NATO legally cannot. In effect, the Montreux Treaty turned the Black Sea into a testbed for proxy innovation, where Ukraine fights on behalf of the world's maritime democracies. The Kremlin now faces a cruel choice. Pull the fleet farther from Crimea and admit weakness, or stay close and risk more humiliating losses on camera. Satellite imagery shows most caliber missile carriers anchored near Sochi or hidden behind civilian docks. Even then, attacks have reached beyond Crimea's shorelines. Unverified but credible OSINT reports suggest that in August 2025, 2 Ukrainian USVs struck a fuel depot inside Novorossiysk harbor, the deepest penetration of the war yet. If confirmed, it means Russia no longer has a safe harbor anywhere on its western coastline. This isn't just about warships, it's about perception. Every time a fuel depot burns, insurance premiums for Russian exports spike. Each port under threat costs Moscow millions in diverted shipments and security operations. Ukraine is bleeding Russia financially, not just militarily. Moscow's television channels still show triumphant sailors waving flags, but physics doesn't bend to propaganda. If a drone can travel 250 miles across the sea at night guided by cheap cameras, no amount of televised bravado can keep steel afloat. That's the paradox of modern war. You can lie to your people, but not to your satellites. Western intelligence, open-source mappers, and even commercial ships record the truth in real time. Every plume of smoke on radar, every AIS transponder going dark, becomes a timestamp of Russian loss. Meanwhile, Russian bloggers, once loyal propagandists, are quietly admitting what state TV won't: that Sevastopol is no longer a home port. It's a target. Each time an explosion rocks the harbor, it echoes through Russian telegram channels faster than any censorship can contain. This invisible revolution isn't confined to Ukraine. In the Persian Gulf, the Red Sea, and the Taiwan Strait, navies are studying the Ukrainian model. How do you defend a billion-dollar ship against a $30,000 drone? How do you justify traditional fleets when asymmetric warfare keeps proving cheaper and deadlier? Even the U.S. Navy is adapting. Programs like Ghost Fleet Overlord and Task Force 59 in the Gulf are testing autonomous swarms inspired by Ukraine's successes. The Pentagon now treats Ukraine's naval campaign as a live laboratory, an open experiment in distributed warfare. For America's allies, that's a preview of what's to come. In the 2030s, naval warfare won't be about carriers and cruisers. It'll be about software, satellite links, and who owns the electromagnetic spectrum. Ukraine's sea campaign will likely expand beyond sabotage toward permanent denial, making Crimea's waters unusable for Russian logistics. The next evolution is rumored to include autonomous hunter drones able to loiter and self-coordinate attacks. Ukrainian sources claim prototypes are already being tested near Odessa, though those reports remain unverified. If true, Russia's fleet may face the first fully self-organizing robotic navy in combat history. But even if those systems stay experimental, the psychological effect is irreversible. Russia once controlled every way from Sevastopol to Snake Island. Now, every ripple might hide an enemy. Every splash of foam could be a drone. Every light on the horizon might mean another ship's last moment. The sea has always favored those who dare to reinvent it. For centuries, empires measured strength by how much iron they could float. Ukraine flipped that rule upside down, proving that courage, code, and creativity can sink an empire's pride. The Black Sea used to be a symbol of Russian certainty. Now it's a mirror, reflecting a new truth about modern warfare. In the age of drones, the line between engineer and soldier no longer exists. Victory belongs to whoever learns faster. If that resonates with you, stay with us. Because the next battles won't be measured in tons of steel, they'll be measured in lines of code and flashes of light across the night sea. Subscribe to stay ahead of the next wave in modern warfare.